Tonight, a Tasmanian pay dispute shakes up the final round of the AFL. Hello, I'm Guy Stayner. This is ABC News. Also tonight, Hobart hospital workers told their revamped ED won't meet patient needs. TT Line has most of its polo pony convictions quashed. And from 2IC to #1 candidate, Kamala Harris officially accepts her nomination for president. A Tasmanian industrial dispute has caused chaos for the AFL, forcing it to revamp its round 24 fixture. Adam Langenberg joins us now from Launceston. Adam, what's happened?
Guy, I'm here at Launceston's York Park, which has found itself at the centre of an industrial dispute between TasNetworks and the Communications, Electrical and Plumbing Union. The union's asking for pay parity with the mainland, but TasNetworks says the 35% pay rise is unaffordable. During the industrial dispute, the union's put in place a number of bans, including on switching the power back on. That's led to longer delays in restoring outages. Given that and a struggle to find a contractor to turn the power back on tomorrow if there was an outage, there was a series of crisis meetings today between the state government, TasNetworks and the AFL. They've resolved to bring forward the time slot. From a twilight start of 4:40 p.m, it's now going to be held almost 4 hours earlier, kicking off at 12:30.
So, Adam, what is the likelihood of losing power at York Park tomorrow?
Well, TasNetworks hopes, Guy, that the earlier start means that lights won't be needed and therefore there's a lower chance of an outage. It is going to have a fair bit of rain and be overcast here in Launceston though, so there is a chance that the lights are needed. So we'll wait and see how that goes. It is worth pointing out, Guy, that this isn't the only game affected. Our Richmond Tigers play against the Gold Coast Suns tomorrow. That's going to be held an hour later than scheduled at 3:20, so all three AFL games tomorrow aren't held at the same time.
Adam Langenberg in Launceston, thank you. A leaked email sent to staff at the Royal Hobart Hospital reveals the proposed redesign of the emergency department won't fit current and future needs. In the email, the ED management team says the redevelopment is on hold due to a cost blowout of $50 million, with the design forced to be scaled back. The government is refusing to budge, saying the upgrades will meet future demand.
An emergency department in urgent need of assistance.
We had a doctor last year reference the Royal Hobart Hospital to being similar to trying to get patients around, similar to a cave in Thailand.
The government's spending $130 million on stage 2 of the redevelopment. But a leaked email from management to staff says the redevelopment is on hold due to budgetary issues, that the government has directed the Tasmanian Health Service executive to endorse a redesign of the existing ED footprint within the current budget, and that management openly acknowledges the design isn't fit for purpose to meet current needs, let alone the future needs of the department.
Ultimately, there's one additional resuscitation bay, there's a little extra space in a dedicated mental health unit, a couple of extra ambulance bays, and that is about it. In terms of the refurbishment, it's not going to bring the emergency department in line with Australian standards.
Another email reveals the cost blowout is around $50 million, which the government is refusing to spend. A Department of Health spokesperson said the ED management's claims were false and the project was not on hold. They say the current design plans will provide the facilities needed to meet future demand for emergency care in southern Tasmania.
This is just another slap in the face to an already exhausted, burnout workforce.
The Greens say we shouldn't throw money away.
There's no point investing in the emergency department at the Royal if it's not going to do what we need for the long term.
Earlier this year, a parliamentary committee overseeing the RHH development recommended a $149 million upgrade to the emergency department.
We have record deficit and debt, and we have a government now with the wrong priorities. They're cutting the health service when they should be investing in it to create efficiencies.
A dire diagnosis on a tight budget. Eliza Closer, ABC News.
Ferry operator TT Line has had a win in the Supreme Court over the deaths of 16 polo ponies. The horses were found dead in a truck in regional Victoria the day after sailing aboard the Spirit of Tasmania from Devonport in January 2018. After a lengthy legal battle, TT Line was found guilty in a Burnie court of 29 breaches of the Animal Welfare Act and fined $75,000. But the company successfully appealed the verdicts and fine and was today convicted by Supreme Court Chief Justice Alan Blow of just 2 breaches and fined $4,000. In a statement, Spirit CEO Bernard Dwyer said he welcomed the decision. Vice President Kamala Harris has formally accepted her party's nomination to run for the US's top job. An adoring crowd mostly applauded her keynote address, but divisions within the Democratic ranks still flickered through on the 4th and final day of the convention.
From supporting star to the lead role.
I accept your nomination.
An extraordinary moment for the daughter of immigrants, thanking her late mother for her self-belief.
She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it.
She emphasised her years as a prosecutor.
My entire career, I've only had one client, the people.
And she prosecuted the case against her Republican rival.
The consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
The war in Gaza remains a division point. Protests have continued throughout the week, with the party refusing to add a Palestinian-American speaker to the stage.
We feel that our party is betraying our values with this decision.
Harris defending the current policy, but striking a slightly different tone.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends.
She also promised progressive reforms like enshrining abortion and voting rights.
What about us?
This night had another star-studded lineup, the famous side-by-side with Harris's family.
And what are you here to do?
To teach you how to say your auntie's name.
Kamala!
Donald Trump held his own campaign event at the southern border, but was watching events in Chicago closely.
Why didn't she do the things that she's complaining about? She could have done it 3.5 years ago. She could do it tonight.
It's hard to exaggerate just how much Kamala Harris's ascent to the top of the party ticket has completely reshaped this race. The Vice President is still claiming the underdog tag, but within this room there is an overwhelming sense of optimism that they can win this race. The polls are tight, but they believe they have the momentum and they believe America is ready to elect its first female president.
She's gonna just go all the way. They won't know what to do.
Democrats have embraced a common direction.
We are not going back.
Now Harris has 11 weeks to convince the country to come with her. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Chicago.
Back home, and all branches of the CFMEU's construction division have been formally placed into administration over allegations of corruption and infiltration by organised crime. The union had resisted the appointment of an external administrator, but earlier this week the federal parliament passed laws giving the government the power to step in. With an administrator now in place, hundreds of officials have had their roles terminated, most of them volunteer jobs. But the National Secretary, Zack Smith, remains in his position. The federal government moved ahead of a possible court challenge to the legislation.
There's no place for corruption or intimidation in the building industry from unions. There's no place for corruption, and to have a corrupt union official, you need a corrupt employer to be paying their money, and there's no place for it.
Australia will, for the first time, take command of an international maritime effort to protect shipping routes in the Red Sea, but won't deploy any additional military assets. A month after the ABC first revealed the mission, the Albanese government's facing criticism for not providing a warship. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
A glimpse of the Australian Army's future lethal hardware. High-tech South Korean-designed vehicles will soon be built at a new facility in the Defence Minister's own Victorian electorate. Richard Marles on hand for the opening of the military factory before officially confirming the ADF's next overseas mission.
An Australian will be taking command of the Combined Task Force 153. This is a very significant step.
From October, a Navy captain and a small number of other Australian personnel already stationed in the Middle East will take charge of an international maritime task force. CTF 153 is dedicated to protecting shipping routes in the Red Sea from Houthi rebel attacks. But as the ABC revealed last month, the new deployment won't include an Australian warship.
It should be more, and if we had a competent government in place, it would be more, because it's important to stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies.
We need to be focused on our region. I mean, that is in terms of the assets that we deploy.
It's not ideal for us to send a command team across but not to send a ship. However, we know that the Royal Australian Navy does not have enough surface combatants.
This week, the threats posed to international trade through the Red Sea highlighted by an attack on a Greek vessel. And the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier has now arrived in the Middle East amid concerns of a growing conflict.
We know that tensions are high. We want to see a de-escalation of tensions in the region.
Australia's command role in the Middle East will last just 6 months, and privately, American officials are disappointed that this country's still declining to send a warship to the region. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
As the afterglow of the Paris Olympics fades, many of Australia's leading athletes are facing the harsh realities of the aftermath. Australia's most successful games in history yielded 18 gold medals, but the athletes are now dealing with financial, emotional and mental challenges.
Matt Wern was the first man to defend a dinghy-class gold medal in Paris. It earned him the honour of carrying the Australian flag at the closing ceremony, but the spotlight is already fading.
Once all the media and everything dies down, we'll just sort of be going back to, your sailor that sails out of Perth, and there won't be much involved, and it becomes hard to find sponsors.
Pride in, I'm so proud of myself, I'm so proud of us, but I'm so disappointed. And I feel so embarrassed.
Georgie Parker was part of the Hockey Roos team that was knocked out in the quarterfinals in Rio 2016.
It's a really sad time, and you're embarrassed and you're anxious and you're sad and you're angry and you're feeling all these emotions that you feel that you're not allowed to give.
Parker's now in the process of having her Olympic rings tattoo removed.
Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of something that I didn't achieve.
She says it's important to remember not every athlete has a picture-perfect Olympics.
So I think it's that sudden shift of being 100 miles an hour to suddenly no one caring about you again is what's the hardest bit.
In my head, I'm like, I gave it everything I have and it still wasn't enough. But what is enough? I guess that's the thing that I'm trying to come to terms with now.
For some, the answer may have to wait another 4 years. Amanda Shalala, ABC News.
Protesters in Jakarta have forced the president into a major backflip with the biggest Indonesian demonstrations in years. President Joko Widodo was trying to get around a court ruling that would have paved the way for his youngest son to run for a political seat. But the proposed changes to election laws sparked widespread calls of nepotism.
Late into the evening outside Indonesia's parliament, police and protesters were still sparring after a remarkable outpouring of anger across the country. Tens of thousands of protesters turned out in major cities. accusing the president and his allies of trying to rewrite election rules to favour his son.
We'll keep fighting and we'll get many more people to join us. This is only the beginning of how we fight against attacks on democracy in Indonesia.
President Joko Widodo last year managed to secure his oldest son a loophole to run for vice president, despite being below a minimum age limit. Now it appears he's trying again with a petition to allow his other son, 29-year-old Kaesang Pangarap, to run in regional elections. But the court this week ruled the minimum age rule of 30 must remain in place, prompting parliamentary allies of Mr Widodo to try to rewrite election rules and defy the court.
The mess will continue until Joko Widodo is out from Indonesian politics for good.
And with anger mounting, the president's allies announced they were cancelling their efforts to revise the laws.
After a decade as president and with just a few weeks to go, this really is a blow for Joko Widodo. Having secured the vice presidency for his oldest son, it appeared he was well on the way to creating a family dynasty to continue his influence after his term ends in October.
The backdown has largely calmed the mood in the Indonesian capital, at least for now. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Jakarta.
The body of British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch has been recovered from the wreckage of a super yacht that sank off the coast of Italy. 6 bodies have now been brought to shore after the vessel capsized during a freak storm near Sicily. The search is continuing for Mr Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah. A judicial investigation is now underway into the disaster, with some experts claiming the luxury vessel should have been strong enough to weather the storm. Negotiators are arriving in Cairo for the next round of ceasefire talks, with one of the biggest sticking points, the issue of the Egypt-Gaza border, expected to be top of the agenda. Israel is demanding its troops remain in control of the corridor separating Gaza and Egypt, rejecting the proposal to station international troops there instead. Hamas, which will not be at the Cairo talks, says it won't accept a deal that allows Israeli forces to stay in Gaza. The US envoy to the United Nations called on the Security Council to press Hamas to accept a bridging proposal by Israel, while the Palestinian Observer urged the UN to do more to stop the fighting in Gaza.
You have the tools to act. You have the resolutions to act. Please act. Deal or no deal. There is no excuse for the Israelis' continued killing of innocent Palestinian civilians.
Kyiv says it's used a high-precision US-made bomb to attack a Russian military post in the region of Kursk, where Ukraine has launched an incursion. Ukraine released footage of the airstrike on a Russian platoon command base using an American GBU-39 bomb. The 2-week-long operation into the Kursk region has given a major morale boost to the Ukrainian military after months of Russia making slow but steady gains in the east. President Volodymyr Zelensky said the incursion into Russia's territory is part of its effort to end the 30-month war under the terms of an independent Ukraine. Experts are calling for a complete redesign of button batteries following new research showing they're leading to serious injuries and deaths in kids worldwide. Advocates say recent product safety reforms don't go far enough and they want major manufacturers to take action.
The button batteries in Evie's hearing aids are a constant temptation.
No, we're not popping one out, darling. Can I have it? Can I have it, darling?
The 14-year-old, who has an intellectual disability, was recently hospitalised after putting one in her ear.
That was pretty scary, and it's happened again since then. By the time I saw it, there was sort of lots of black discharge.
A new study has looked into the cases of more than 400 children across the world who suffered button battery injuries.
Button batteries are dangerous because they form a current which releases hydroxide ions, and those hydroxide ions are extremely alkaline and corrosive.
The leading injury was a hole or damage to the esophagus, followed by burning through to the windpipe and aorta. 35 children died, including 3 in Australia.
It can make holes in the intestines, which can also be potentially fatal.
Injuries from inserting the batteries included a hole in the nose.
Worldwide, button battery injuries are rising. In Australia, about 20 kids a week end up in emergency departments. Advocates say recent reforms like child-proof packaging don't address the core issue. The products remain unsafe.
We started seeing kids ingesting button batteries in the late 70s, and the button battery companies have known about it since then.
There needs to be mandatory legislation that force manufacturers into changing button batteries.
Major manufacturer Energizer says it's introduced a bitter coating and blue dye and continues to research how to improve safety. Michael Atkin, ABC News.
After 10 straight gains, the share market had a bit of a stumble today, while the ANZ has been hit with a $250 million penalty. Here's David Chow.
Well, after rising for 10 days in a row, the All Ords finally fell today, but only by a tiny fraction. But it's done pretty well lately, having jumped 5% from its low point a few weeks ago. But overall, it's still down more than 1% from the record high it touched just before that huge sell-off at the start of the month. Meanwhile, today's worst performer was Ingham's, which played chicken and lost. Its share price plunged despite its profit jumping 68%, which, it seems, wasn't good enough. But Main Pharma shares surged despite its $169 million loss, which wasn't as bad as last year's. And ANZ did poorly after the financial regulator APRA ordered the bank to keep an extra $250 million in reserves. So that's money just sitting there doing almost nothing, which is a bank's worst nightmare. All this while another regulator, ASIC, investigates the bank for market manipulation in relation to its bond trading. Now, this is really hurting ANZ as it's fallen behind the other banks on a total returns basis, which tracks the increase in its share price and dividends. Now, overseas, Wall Street fell quite a bit, but it was a mixed bag for Asian markets. Oil prices rose sharply, while gold, iron ore and copper fell. And the Aussie dollar is buying 67.2 US cents. And finally, Tesla is no longer the top-selling EV brand in Europe. That honour now goes to BMW. And it just so happens the Tesla brand is turning toxic, according to consumer surveys, which could be a CEO problem. And that's finance.
Marine rescue crews are celebrating freeing a whale that got tangled in Sydney Harbour. In an operation spanning 20 hours, they were able to cut the young humpback loose, allowing it to resume its migration past Tasmania.
This is the moment the young humpback was set free.
Yes, got it!
With specialists cutting off a rope and floats that were wrapped around the base of its tail.
This animal has been through a huge ordeal. Being entangled in fishing gear is an awful thing, but then having boats, drones, in the busiest harbour on Earth.
The 13-metre mammal was first spotted by a whale-watching cruise near Manly at lunchtime on Thursday.
This whale was one of many or thousands humpback whales just doing its normal thing, its migration.
It triggered a major marine operation that had to be paused while the sun was down.
So we attached a tracker to that whale in the hope that we'd be able to pick it up today to finish the job.
But the tracker became dislodged overnight when the whale was outside the harbour limits. Fortunately, it came back for help.
It stayed close. We were able to find it because if it went onto the humpback highway, it could have been like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Restarting the mission this morning, they made several attempts to approach it over more than 4 hours.
The challenge with that whale was the fact that it had so much energy, and it just took quite a long time for us to tire it out so that we could then get in and do that cut safely.
At the end of a dangerous and lengthy operation, these heroes celebrated on shore.
What we did today certainly gave that animal the best possible outcome, for its future.
Healthy and heading back out to sea, having survived to tell the tale. Xanthi Gregory, ABC News, Sydney.
Well, back to the AFL, and the final round kicks off at the MCG tonight with 7 of the weekend's 9 matches set to have an impact on what teams make the 8 and in what order. Erin Masikavetri is at the MCG where Collingwood has just the slimmest of hopes. Erin, how's it all shaping up?
Good evening, Guy. Well, it would take a miracle for the Pies to get into the finals. They'd have to win by well over 100 points and have other results go their way as well. So really just pride on the line here for Melbourne and Collingwood tonight. Tomorrow, back here at the MCG, the Tigers, they'll be trying to avoid the wooden spoon. They play the Gold Coast, and if they win and North Melbourne lose to Hawthorn, they could just jump up off the bottom of the ladder. Tomorrow night, the Swans, they have a chance to claim the minor premiership with a win. They're already one game clear at the top of the ladder, so a win against Adelaide at the SCG would mean that they can take home that prize tomorrow night. And then looking ahead to Sunday, 3 really big games of football, and the teams have just been confirmed as well. So the Western Bulldogs in 6th place, they take on the Giants first up. And good news for Dogs fans, Tim English, the ruckman, has been named. There was some doubt about an ankle injury, but he is in the team. Following that, Carlton in 8th place, they play St Kilda, and the Blues earlier today confirmed Charlie Curnow won't be right for that game, so he will miss another week with his ankle injury. But Adam Sard and Mitch McGovern come back into the team. And the final game of the round, Fremantle in 9th place taking on Port Adelaide. Port, they welcome back Mitch Georgiades, their forward, to their side. But Fremantle have everything to play for, sitting in 9th place. If they can snatch a win, and if the Dogs or the Blues or the Hawks lose, then it's theirs for the taking. They can still make the 8. So a very big weekend still ahead.
Erin Mustika-Vetri at the MCG. Thank you. Australian cyclist Ben O'Connor has taken a commanding lead in Spain's La Vuelta after powering to victory on stage 6. He dominated the 185-kilometre section, breaking away on the penultimate climb to seize the race leader's red jersey from 3-time champion Primoz Roglic. The 28-year-old from Perth now leads by almost 5 minutes in the general classification. The victory also means he joins the prestigious list of riders with stage wins on all 3 of cycling's Grand Tours.
I just laid it all out there, and I felt like I could win this stage from the start. So yeah, it's pretty special when you can just go out and crush it like that. I absolutely loved every moment.
English golfer Charlie Hull is the opening round leader at the Women's British Open, with Australia's contingent struggling to make an impression. Steph Kyriakou was the best of the Australians after shooting a 4-over par 76 in blustery conditions at St Andrews. Compatriots Grace Kim and world number 5 Hannah Green were a stroke further back. Charlie Hull leads at 5 under par. And TassieCast has a new episode up on the ABC Listen app. This week, host Airlie Ward spoke to state political reporter Adam Langenberg.
Economist Saul Eslake has just warned that if something doesn't change, and fast, we're heading off a financial cliff, Adam.
Yeah, it's all pretty scary what he said. So over the decade, he said that we're going to average operating deficits of about $1.3 billion. And then in a decade's time, debt is projected to reach $16 billion.
It is a good listen, I can recommend it. To the weather, and tonight's photo is a fog bow taken from the summit of Mount Rufus near Lake St Clair by Colin Langridge. Swansea again topped the state with 18 degrees. It was 17 in Hobart, Burnie and St Helens, 16 in Launceston. Rain yesterday was mostly about the southwest. 48 millimetres fell at Warra. Grove had 18, Hobart 4. The satellite image shows a low pressure system and rain band that's bearing down on us. Tomorrow, a warm front, that's the red line, that's going to cross the state during the morning, and red line warm fronts, they're associated with rain. The cold front that sits behind it will also produce some showers. Across the country tomorrow, another wet day in Perth. There'll be showers in Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra. Fine and warm in Adelaide and Brisbane. Back home, there'll be rain statewide, easing to showers during the afternoon. Up to 35 millimetres across the west and northwest tomorrow, up to 20 in Launceston and 15 in Hobart, up to 10 millimetres along the east coast. The rain will make it a mild morning, albeit very wet. 9 degrees overnight in Launceston, ahead of a top of 15, 16 in Devonport and Smithton. 16 also along the east coast, 14 for Oatlands. 5 to 15 millimetres in Hobart tomorrow with a top of 14 degrees. Up to 20 millimetres could fall in the Huon Valley. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 11 minutes to 7. On coastal waters, there'll be northeast to northwesterly winds of 15 to 20 knots, reaching up to 30 knots across the north. There are strong wind warnings from Sandy Cape across to St Helens Point. Sunday, showers statewide, increasing to rain during the day. Monday, more showers statewide. And it's going to be even wetter on Tuesday. We keep adding another day to this graphic, yet it doesn't change much. Rain and showers throughout next week. And that's it for this evening's program. See you on Monday.